Have you ever thought about how a small light can illuminate the darkest corners of life? Tonight, Moonlitwest will take you on an emotional journey of hope, loss, and the strength of love through this special story. Welcome to Moonlitwest, where stories are told to touch your heart. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a gentle moment with us. Now, let yourself relax, close your eyes, and join us as we step into tonight's story. The sky over the small coastal town glowed with a warm golden hue as the sun slowly descended toward the distant horizon. A gentle breeze carried the salty scent of the sea and the sweet aroma of wildflowers, weaving through the lush green hills and stretching down to the sandy shores. This tranquil town felt like a refuge from the rush of life, its cobblestone streets winding among small, weathered houses, each seeming to hold stories etched into its stones by time. Ella Hart sat by the large bay window of her modest home, her slender figure bathed in the soft rays of the setting sun streaming through the frosted glass. Her house, though humble, exuded a sense of warmth, with remnants of her past life scattered throughout. A polished violin rested carefully against the wall, sheets of aged music neatly stacked in a corner, and photographs of her under stage lights, all telling the story of a once brilliant past. Once a star of the National Symphony Orchestra, Ella was a gifted violinist whose enchanting music had moved countless hearts. But everything changed after a fateful accident. The screech of tires on the road and the shattering of glass in that horrifying moment not only took her hearing, but also the musical world she loved. Now, Ella lived in a world of haunting silence, lonely yet peaceful, accompanied by the sound of ocean waves crashing against the shore outside her small house. Far off, where the coastline stretched endlessly, a grand mansion stood imposingly against the majestic landscape. Its white walls gleamed, and its tall windows towered like silent sentinels, embodying perfection yet radiating coldness. This was the home of Theo Rivers. Once a passionate travel photographer, Theo had roamed the world to capture its most breathtaking moments. From sun-scorched deserts to lush, untamed jungles, every frame he shot seemed to breathe life and freedom. But that freedom had been stripped away during an extravagant hot air balloon expedition. Theo had an accident while trying to capture a breathtaking sunset over rugged cliffs. His daring spirit, once his most captivating trait, turned tragic. A sudden, powerful gust of wind knocked the balloon off course, causing him to lose balance and fall from a perilous height. Miraculously, he survived, but the fall left him paralyzed from the waist down, forcing him to abandon the endless journeys that had once defined his life. The grand mansion by the sea, formerly a base for his adventures, had become a gilded cage, trapping him in bitterness and regret. The photographs that once showcased the beauty of the world now hung coldly on the walls, serving as painful reminders of the life he could no longer reclaim. Hours would pass as Theo sat by the massive windows, his eyes fixed on the waves crashing against the shore, as if seeking an elusive solace amid the vast expanse of water. Yet instead of liberation, he found only deeper solitude. He rejected all offers of help from family and friends, perceiving their kindness as pity, something his pride would never allow him to accept. Having once held the world through his camera lens, Theo now felt left behind, powerless in a body that no longer obeyed his will. Anger and helplessness became his constant companions, imprisoning him in a cycle of self-inflicted despair. Yet buried deep within Theo's steely gray eyes was a faint glimmer, like a small flame refusing to be extinguished. A part of him still remembered the joy of freedom, the meaning he once found in his travels, and the pure beauty of the world. That small, stubborn part, though unnoticed by him, quietly waited for a change, someone who could help him rediscover himself once more. Theo's family, deeply concerned for his state, decided to hire a companion for him. This is how Ella came into his life. In need of a job to make ends meet, she accepted the offer, unaware of the thorny personality she was about to face. She arrived at Theo's mansion on a calm, windless afternoon, with the sea and sky painted in pale blue, as if anticipating the shift that was about to unfold. When Ella stepped into the mansion, she was overwhelmed by its sheer grandeur and elegance. Yet the beauty couldn't mask the coldness that seeped into the air. The high walls seemed to trap shadows, and the atmosphere in the living room felt so heavy it was almost suffocating. From a distant hallway, she heard the slow, deliberate sound of Theo's wheelchair approaching, a sound that carried an unspoken harshness. Their first meeting was as tense as the silence that filled the room. Theo's gaze, cold and scrutinizing, seemed to assess Ella within seconds. Ella, calm and composed, held her silence and offered a soft smile. That meeting, though far from harmonious, marked the beginning of a story neither of them could have anticipated. A tale of healing, hope, and the faint light that could shine even in the darkest corners of the soul. The room where Theo Rivers often sat was a vast, yet cold space, bathed in faint light from tall, floor-to-ceiling windows. Pale sunlight spilled onto the walls, which were adorned with photographs from all around the world. Fiery deserts, majestic mountains, endless oceans. They once embodied Theo's life, but had now become silent fragments, imprisoning him in unspoken pain. He sat motionless in his wheelchair, his tall frame appearing lonely amidst the spacious yet cold room. His gray eyes gazed out toward the shore through the large window, where waves gently kissed the sand, but his eyes were empty, searching for nothing but the void within. Ella Hart stepped in, moving as softly as a breeze. She paused briefly, taking in the grandeur tinged with darkness that filled the room. Her footsteps were almost inaudible, her flat shoes lightly brushing against the polished wooden floor. She stopped and observed the man before her. He exuded sharpness, but something in his eyes, buried deep within their coldness, betrayed a profound sense of hurt. Theo turned when he sensed her presence. His eyes scanned the petite woman standing before him, and his lips curled into a wry smile. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice deliberate, each word pronounced slowly, as if to ensure she understood, but his tone couldn't hide its bitterness. "Ella no respondió inmediatamente." Instead, she placed her small bag on a nearby table, retrieved a notebook and pen, and began writing quickly yet carefully with her slender hands. Once finished, she handed the notebook to Theo. "I'm Ella Hart. Your family has asked me to be here to assist you." Theo glanced at the writing, his eyes darkening. "Assist?" he repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "What do you think you can assist with? You can't even hear. How could you possibly understand what it's like to lose everything?" The words were unspoken, but written hastily on a scrap of paper Theo grabbed from the small table nearby. He wrote quickly, his sharp, slightly slanted handwriting seeming to carry all the anger and mockery within him. Then he pushed the paper toward Ella, his cold eyes fixed on her from behind. "Assist? What do you think you can assist with? You can't even hear. How could you possibly understand what it's like to lose everything?" Ella read the words, her eyes momentarily reflecting a flicker of pain. But she didn't lower her head. Instead, she calmly took back her notebook, her pen moving deliberately yet resolutely. She wrote a short sentence before quietly handing it back to Theo. "Not being able to hear doesn't mean I don't understand loss. If you want me to leave, I will, but if you need me, I'll stay." Theo read the words, his eyes lingering on the simple yet unignorable sentence. He felt an unusual calmness from the woman before him, a calmness he hadn't experienced in months. But he didn't let the feeling linger. He quickly shoved the paper aside, turned his wheelchair, and left, the creak of the wheels emphasizing the fracture in the silent space. Ella stood still for a moment, watching his figure retreat into the hallway. A deep, indescribable sadness rose within her, not because of Theo's harsh words, but because she sensed the depth of the pain that had trapped him. She took a deep breath, then turned her attention back to the room. Her eyes landed on a large photograph hanging in the corner. In the picture, Theo stood atop a snow-covered mountain, holding a camera, his eyes glowing as if he were embracing the entire world. A faint smile crossed Ella's lips, perhaps buried somewhere within the man consumed by his own darkness. There was still a glimmer of light, and she would find a way to help him see it, no matter how long it took. She picked up her notebook again and wrote a single short line. "I'm not going anywhere, at least not today." She placed the notebook on the table and began quietly tidying up the scattered items in the room, as if preparing to embark on a new journey, a journey to rediscover the light in a world that seemed to have gone dark. The morning light streamed through the mansion's large windows, reflecting off the photographs lining the walls. The room was silent, save for the sound of a pen gliding over paper. Theo sat at the desk, his eyes focused on a piece of paper he was writing. Opposite him, Ella was organizing the notes from their earlier conversations, short sentences that seemed to hold an entire world between them. That day, Ella brought a small, old wooden box. Placing it gently on the table, she hesitated for a moment before writing on a slip of paper and sliding it toward Theo. "I want to share something important from my life with you." Theo tilted his head, his eyes reflecting a mix of curiosity and caution. He responded with a short line, "What are you planning to do?" Ella didn't respond immediately. Instead, she opened the small wooden box and took out a violin that gleamed with age and polish. She held the instrument up, gazing at it as if reuniting with an old friend after many years apart. Theo watched her, his brows furrowed slightly. He pulled out another sheet of paper and quickly wrote on it, "You can't hear. Why do you play the violin?" Ella read the words, a faint smile gracing her lips. She bent down and wrote a reply. "I don't need to hear. I feel music through its vibrations, and I want you to feel it with me." Before Theo could react, Ella placed the violin on her shoulder, positioned the bow on the strings, and drew out the first note. In the stillness of the room, the sound of the violin resonated, soft but full of emotion, as if each note carried its own story. Ella cerró los ojos, enfocándose en las vibraciones que sentía a través de sus dedos y cuerpo. Theo watched her, his gaze shifting from skepticism to a feeling he couldn't quite name. The music filled the room, each note flooding the space with softness and raw sentiment. But what struck Theo wasn't just the melody, it was the way Ella played. Her movements seemed to merge with the violin, her eyes closed, her delicate hands gliding over the strings as though she was feeling the music with her heart rather than her ears. When Ella finally stopped, she lowered the violin and looked at Theo, the faint smile still lingering on her face. She wrote one final line. "Music isn't meant to be heard, it's meant to be felt." Theo remained silent, not writing anything in return, but his eyes softened, and in that moment, he saw her not just as a resilient woman, but as an artist, a soul radiating light despite being trapped in silence. After a few moments of stillness, he reached for the paper and pen beside him, writing a short line before sliding it over to her. "Do you remember the last time you played the violin in front of an audience?" Ella read the words, her eyes briefly lighting up with surprise. She thought for a moment before writing her reply, her handwriting slow, as though she was pouring her emotions into each letter. "I remember it vividly. It was the biggest performance of my life, but I couldn't hear the final applause." Theo read the line, his hand trembling slightly. He crossed out his previous note and wrote again. "But you still play like this, still feel the music. That's something not everyone can do." Ella looked up at him, a gentle smile appearing on her face. She placed the violin down, took another piece of paper, and wrote, "What about you? Have you ever taken a photo you'll never forget?" Theo paused, his eyes lingering on the question. He nodded and wrote back. I once photographed the sunrise on Mount Kilimanjaro. I felt like I captured the entire world through my lens that day. Ella read the words, her face lighting up with curiosity. She quickly wrote another question, her letters larger and faster, as though her excitement couldn't be contained. Can you tell me about it? I want to know what it felt like. Theo looked at her, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. He picked up the pen and, for the first time, wrote more than his usual terse replies. It was early morning, before the sun rose. The air was so cold I couldn't feel my hands, but when the first light touched the mountains, the whole world seemed to awaken. I felt free. It was just me and the world in front of me. Ella read the lines in silence, as if she could see the entire scene through his words. She looked up and wrote another line. I think you can still find that feeling. Can we try? Theo hesitated at her suggestion. He didn't respond immediately, simply looking at her for a long moment, as though weighing something in his mind. Finally, he picked up the pen and wrote a short line. If you play the violin, I'll teach you how to take photos. Deal? Ella read the words, a radiant smile breaking across her face. She wrote back, only 2 large words. Deal. For the first time, they laughed together. The coldness and distance between them faded, leaving only 2 people beginning to find light within one another. The next day, Theo prepared a surprise. When Ella entered the room, she saw an old but functional camera set on the table. Beside it was a piece of paper with larger handwriting than usual. If you can feel music through vibrations, I want you to feel the world through images. Ella looked at the camera, her eyes lighting up with excitement. She sat down, pulled the piece of paper toward her, and wrote, I don't know how to use it. Will you teach me? Theo nodded slightly, and for the first time, a faint smile appeared on his face. That entire morning, they worked together in silence. Theo showed her how to adjust the lens, set the light, and frame a shot. Ella listened intently, occasionally writing questions, and each time she pressed the shutter, an image appeared on the screen, making her smile like a child discovering something magical. In the days that followed, Ella suggested that Theo go outside. At first, he refused, his gaze as cold as ever, but Ella didn't give up. Each day, she left a note with a short invitation. Come with me. You can show me how to photograph the world outside. Finally, one afternoon, Theo agreed. He sat in his wheelchair while Ella pushed him through the narrow streets of the town. They passed the harbor where fishing boats were docked, and through fields of wildflowers stretching to the horizon. Ella constantly lifted the camera, capturing every moment. A sparrow perched on a branch, the sparkling light on the water, the townspeople smiling and greeting each other. When they stopped at a small cafe by the beach, Theo looked at one of the photos Ella had taken. It was an image of an old fisherman, his face beaming with a radiant smile. The picture stirred something within Theo, a distant memory, a simple joy he had long forgotten. He wrote a short line on a piece of paper and slid it toward Ella. "You see things I've missed?" Ella sonrió y escribió de vuelta. "Thanks to you, I've seen how beautiful the world is." And as the sunset painted the sky with hues of gold and orange, the two of them sat side by side, needing no more words. There were only the images, the music of the sea, and a quiet peace that began to fill the spaces within their hearts, gradually uncovering the light they had each lost. The sky outside the mansion began to turn gray, with thick clouds rolling in like a dark curtain over the once peaceful scene. The wind blew fiercely against the tall windows, carrying the sound of the sea like a mournful symphony. In the silent room, Ella sat at the long wooden table, carefully reading through the notes Theo had left in his notebook. His handwriting was neat, but it revealed a sense of urgency, as if he were racing against something she didn't yet understand. As she turned a page, she came across a line that stood out, not one of his usual sarcastic remarks or adventurous tales. This line carried a different tone, somber and heavy. "Life has taken everything from me, and now I have no reason to hold on anymore." Ella's heart stopped. She read the words over and over, each letter pressing down on her mind. Her trembling hands turned the pages, where Theo had written about his health, doctor visits, diagnoses, and the severe spinal complications that were gradually shortening his life. He had known everything for a long time, but had never told anyone. On the final page, there was only a short, chilling statement. "I will leave this world before it takes the last of me." Ella sat frozen, her mind reeling. Images of Theo flooded her thoughts, the bitter yet deeply complex man who had taught her to see the world through a camera, who was slowly but surely learning to believe in life again. And now, she realized that just as he had begun to find light, the darkness was ready to consume him. She set the notebook down, her eyes welling with tears. Ella couldn't sit still. She stood up and walked quickly down the long hallway to Theo's room. When she pushed the door open, he was sitting by the large window, his eyes fixed on the waves crashing against the shore in heavy silence. She approached him, placing the notebook on the table in front of him. Theo looked at the notebook, then at Ella, his eyes wide with surprise and a hint of defensiveness. She quickly wrote on a piece of paper, her handwriting shaky but resolute. "Why didn't you tell me? You were planning to give up, weren't you?" Theo stayed silent. He didn't reach for the pen to reply immediately. He just sat there, avoiding her gaze. Finally, he wrote, "You don't understand. I've lost everything. My life now is nothing but a series of meaningless days. You can't change that." Ella read the words, feeling the pain in every letter he had written. She shook her head, tears beginning to stream down her cheeks. She wrote back, her handwriting more forceful. "I lost my hearing. I once thought my life was over too, but I chose to keep living because I know that meaning isn't in what we lose. It's in what we choose to create from what remains. Theo looked at the line, his hands trembling slightly. He didn't respond immediately, but his eyes reflected a conflict he couldn't suppress. Ella continued, her pen moving urgently as if she were pouring her entire soul into the paper. If you can't find a reason, then borrow mine. I believe you can see beauty that no one else can. The world still needs you, and so do I. Theo read the words, and for the first time, the cold sharpness in his eyes softened with emotion. He wrote, "You can't change the truth. I'm going to die. Ella." Ella picked up the pen and responded immediately, tears falling and smudging some of the letters. "We're all going to die, but how we live is what matters. Show me you're stronger than death." Her words were a challenge, a small glimmer of light in the darkness. Theo put the pen down and gazed out the window, but this time, the resignation in his eyes was less apparent. Ella stood up, picked up her violin without writing anything further, and began to play. The music rose, soft yet powerful, telling a story of pain, hope, and resilience. It wasn't just a melody, it was a promise, a declaration that life, no matter how fleeting, deserved to be lived fully. When Ella finished playing, the room fell silent. Theo wrote one final sentence, simple yet filled with meaning. "I'll try. For you." Ella sonrió a través de sus lágrimas, y en ese momento ellos ambos entendieron que habían encontrado algo mucho mayor que su dolor, a una razón para continuar. The gallery was bathed in warm golden light, creating an atmosphere that was both gentle and solemn. Photographs adorned every wall, each one telling its own story, a deeply emotional perspective of Theo's view of the world, from majestic landscapes to everyday moments captured in the small town. Each image exuded vitality and beauty that transcended his limitations. In the center of the room was the largest photograph, a portrait of Ella playing the violin. She stood in a field of wildflowers, the afternoon sunlight streaming through her hair, making it glow like fire. The violin in her hands was more than an instrument. It was a part of her, a vessel for her emotions. Her face in the image was serene, but her eyes were filled with longing, as if she were telling her own story through notes she couldn't hear. On a large screen in the corner of the room, a video played, a scene so breathtaking it almost brought tears to the onlooker's eyes. Ella appeared under the soft golden stage lights, looking like an angel stepped out of a dream. She stood gracefully in a long, white silk gown that flowed like a gentle stream, gleaming with purity as she moved. The dress hugged her slender waist and flared out lightly, each layer of fabric floating delicately with every step, making it seem as though she was gliding through the air. Her long hair fell naturally, soft waves catching the light and glistening under the stage glow. As she bowed her head slightly, preparing to play, her hair shifted gently, with a few loose strands framing her face, making her look both fragile and captivating. Her eyes closed, her lashes delicate like butterfly wings, and a faint smile graced her lips, as if she was fully immersed in her own world. The violin in her hands gleamed, its elegant contours complementing her beauty, as if it was made solely for her. As she drew the bow across the strings, her slender arms created graceful movements, every gesture exuding elegance and enchantment. Each note emerged like a soft breeze, carrying gentleness and depth that touched not just ears but souls. The golden stage lights shimmered at times, reflecting off her smooth skin, giving her an ethereal glow. A light breeze from the stage's fans swept across her, causing her dress to flutter and her hair to dance as though merging with the music. No one could take their eyes off her, a performer not just beautiful on the outside, but radiating an inner brilliance that flowed through every note. The audience seemed to be frozen in time, wrapped in the stillness, with only the sound of the violin filling the space, as though the world had paused to watch and listen to the story she was telling. A wordless story, yet one that held everything: pain, hope, and the light of life that she and Theo had found together. Ella stood there, a vision of beauty and harmony, a dream woven of art and humanity, forever etched in the hearts of those who witnessed it. Ella stood quietly in the middle of the gallery, her eyes brimming with tears as she looked at the images. She knew these weren't just photographs or videos. They were Theo's farewell, his way of immortalizing the beauty they had created together. After a while, she found Theo sitting by a window, where the last light of the evening filtered softly through the curtains. He looked much frailer now, his face gaunt, but his eyes still shone brightly, just as they had the first time she saw him through the photos in his home. When she sat beside him, he handed her a small piece of paper, his hand trembling, but his smile gentle. "I never thought I'd feel the world again, but you've shown me its beauty, even with the little time I have left." Ella no escribió nada a cambio. Instead, she held his hand tightly, feeling the frailty in his grip, her eyes blurred with tears that silently streamed down her cheeks. Theo looked at her, his lips moving faintly but without sound. Instead, he wrote another line, each letter slow and deliberate. "Thank you, Ella. You are the last light in my life." Ella read the words, and her heart broke. She held him close, tears flowing freely, unable to hold back anymore. She sobbed, her cries echoing softly in the still room, as though trying to keep him there, clinging to the final moments they had together. Theo closed his eyes, a faint smile lingering on his lips. He said nothing more, wrote nothing more, but his hand in hers slowly loosened, and his breath grew quieter, like waves retreating from the shore. He passed away in her embrace, peaceful as the evening light fading into the night. A week later, Ella stood on the shore, where the wind swept over the crashing waves, carrying with it the breath of nature. In her hands was Theo's notebook, its pages filled with the words he had written to her, the moments they had shared. She knew he was gone, but what he had left behind lived on, not just in her, but in every photograph, every perspective he had captured of the world. She opened the notebook and read the final line he had written. Life isn't about what we lose, but what we choose to create with what remains. Ella cerró el cuaderno, tomando un profundo suspiro. She turned her back to the sea and walked toward the town, where she knew there was much more she needed to do. She wouldn't just live on, she would carry Theo's light with her, spreading it to others, just as he had helped her find meaning again. And with every step she took, she knew that somewhere he was watching her, smiling, as free as the light. Thank you for spending your time with Moonlitwest on this emotional journey. We hope tonight's story brought you peace, warmth, and reflections to carry into your dreams. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more gentle and meaningful stories every night from our channel. Your support inspires Moonlitwest to continue spreading goodness. With heartfelt gratitude, we wish you a peaceful night, sweet dreams, and a brighter tomorrow. Sleep well.